welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And this is my messy office. I am slightly doing this during daytime, though it is 5 o'clock. It is in May. It's May 10th, the day before Mother's Day. So, but for you guys, seeing this in June, we are starting off with Rapunzel, which, yes, is technically a type of lettuce. So I'm going to be focusing on the German tale as recorded by William and Jacob Grimm in their children's and family tales that came out in 1812. That is the most common version, I'd say, thanks to Disney, kind of. We'll be looking at Tangled. Tangled is interesting and enjoyable, but has very little to do with this. So this is the basic concept of the general Rapunzel tale. So you have a couple, typically they're merchant class, or working class family. Husband and wife, they desperately want a child. She finally gets pregnant or doesn't, depending on the version. Whatever it is, she starts craving Rapunzel or a radish or a rampion. They're not entirely sure. But she sees it outside her window in a sorceress or a witch's garden who's their neighbor. And so she starts wasting away. She will not eat anything else. So her husband, in desperate to keep his wife alive, sneaks into the garden multiple times or once, but in the end he's caught stealing Rapunzel from the witch's or sorceress's garden, and she's going to kill him. And instead she decides to demand their firstborn. Not an unusual concept in these German fairy tales. Give me your firstborn child. So that is what happens. They give birth to a girl. They are forced to hand over this little girl to this witch, whose name, strangely enough, is Gothel. So that is what she is called later in the tale. So she takes the little girl and raises her. When she's about 12, she locks her up in the tower. So, and there's no doors. And by this time, she's obviously never cut this girl's hair. And so she uses the hair. However, it's a weird concept. How on earth that would happen without tearing her hair out? But no matter how long it is. But she's a sorceress. So, to let her up to give Rapunzel food. And you, again, get to the tale when she's up in the tower. And she's refusing to let Mother Gothel up. Or I think it's called Dame Gothel. Up until eventually she's too weak to basically say no. Because, again, she's sick of being locked up there. Because she's about 16 at this point. So she's been up there since she was 12. So she probably was isolated before. It doesn't specify what was going on before she turned 12. So obviously she had nothing to do with her parents. So eventually she's up in this tower. She's bored. She's growing up. But her guardian, who is her supposed mother, just keeps telling her, it's like, yeah, you need to stay here. So, and I'm protecting you from the outer world. Until one day a traveling prince comes into this enchanted forest. He hears her singing. Depending on the version, sometimes it's immediate that he finds her. Sometimes he watches for a couple of days, coming back and forth. But eventually he gets up and meets Rapunzel. Again, depending on the version, they either fall in love at first sight or it takes a little bit. Now, this is something that also depends on the version. In the original version, what happens is I'm going to call her Mother Gothel because that's what's called in Tangled. That's just easier. Comes up and Rapunzel remarks, at least in the original version, that her clothes are getting tight. Now, in the other versions, she slips up and mentions that Mother Gothel is heavier, which both versions, it's oh, you betrayed me, you let somebody else up here, you let somebody defile you, particularly, in the original version, because she's pregnant. And she cuts off the hair and banishes her to the wilderness. Prince comes back, he climbs the hair, it's Gothel, she's infuriated. He jumps from a window into thorns, goes blind, wanders around the wilderness for a while till eventually he finds Rapunzel, who's given birth to their twins. And her tears bring back his sight, and they lived happily ever after. I'm not sure. The twins are sometimes babies, sometimes older, sometimes it's years. It really does depend on the version. But yeah, they changed it in the original 1812 version. Rapunzel, Gothel finds out because her clothes are too tight. Because she comments that her clothes are getting tight. Because she has no clue what's going on. She has no idea she's pregnant until she gives birth. And they don't talk about that. It's just the prince finds, she wanders around the wilderness. Prince finds her, she has twins. And they live happily ever after. So that is the general tale of it. Obviously, in later versions, they cut out the whole pregnancy thing. It's like, no, we're not going to say you had twins. So that really is the basic tale of Rapunzel. She has long hair. I don't think it's specified that it's blonde, though that is one of the more common tropes. But again, German have a tendency to be blue-eyed blondes. So at least that's the ideal. So that's what you're seeing here. But that's the gist of the story. Children would have it's very magical. I'm not sure the overall theme. Just don't steal from witches' gardens if you don't want your child stolen and kidnapped. But then of course she ends up being a princess after giving birth to twins in the wilderness. So yeah, it's an interesting tale. So that's really about it. That's the general tale that they were basing off of. We're going to be looking at Tangled, which is sitting right here, which has very, very little to do with the story I just recounted. Again, this is original Brothers Grimm's tale, so if you are looking at the Brothers Grimm, if you're looking at damsel kind of in distress rescued by a prince tale, I mean, Rapunzel's been parodied like crazy. Locking up in towers, being dependent on a guy. Mind you, of course, she isn't exactly, because he doesn't get her out. She gets her pregnant, and then she's banished. And then she survives with small children, gives birth alone in the wilderness. And then he finds her. So it's a very interesting, very simple tale. So again, if you're looking at the Brothers Grimm, if you're looking at traditional fairy tales, this is an interesting one to look at. And as far as I know, no, there's some interesting, we'll be looking at Sleeping Beauty later. That also has original tales that involve, or is that Snow White? There's mixtures of going on here. There's various times where babies are involved in these. With the exception of Cinderella. Cinderella does not have babies. There's Snow White and Sleeping Beauty have original tales that involve babies, and are a little bit more unusual. So that is it for this review. We will be going on to the rest of Tales from Rapunzel. So if you like what you see, be sure to like and subscribe. I have already covered Frozen, Brave, Little Mermaid, did Mulan, and Raya and the Last Dragon. We will be covering some more Cinderella next month. I've already covered deep dives into both Cinderella and Beauty and the Beast. So I'm just going back to Cinderella because there's a lot of Cinderella. Going on. So, and then I'm not sure what comes after that. We'll get there. So we will be covering all Disney princesses, except for, of course, Beauty and the Beast, because I did it already. So like and subscribe and leave a comment if you have one. Thank you.